This is Chris Carlson, and welcome to the Boulder Banking Podcast. My guest is Tim Ohlde, President of Elk State Bank and CEO of Country Banker Systems. He's also a GSBC faculty member. We covered a lot of ground in this conversation. We started with an explanation of how the Country Banker tool helps banks and bankers better serve their customers. We then turned our attention to the topics Tim covers when he presents at state banking associations and banking schools when discussing ag lending. These topics included energy, effect of the Ukraine situation, climate change, inflation, and the future of ag lending. Tim, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, Chris. I look forward to our conversation and sharing information that I hope bankers can benefit from.
Yeah, I'm looking forward too, Tim. Hey, to kick this off, can you give us a brief background of Tim Ohlde?
Certainly. I'm a farm boy at heart. I grew up in a dairy operation that my brother and three boys continue to run today. I am married to my wife, Deb, for 35 years. And in fact, her family farm is in our care and taking, which has been fun and excellent. She has a background as a K-State grad in economics, ag economics, and master's in public administration with grant writing. Works for Kansas Corn as Director of Grower Services and does consulting and works with our software company. I'm a K-State grad as well, ag education with a lot of economics. Ended up in banking, if you will. We have blessed with three boys. Two are married. One has two children. So I'm a grandpa. Got two grandchildren. That's been a joy. The third one will be graduating from K-State this fall. All three are K-State grads. It's family is a real joy. And so my background started in banking in the mid 80s. In fact, helped put together a stockholder group, change of control, and procure financing, which was interesting during that period of time. Later on, a number of years ago, started a company called Country Banker Systems, a software company. And then I also started teaching over 20 years ago, especially as ag lending, all levels. I've taught in a number of states, and in the last 5 years, have been privileged to be asked to be a speaker at different state ag conferences. So Chris, that's a little bit of my background.
Well, that's a lot of wildcat material that must be amongst all those houses, Tim.
There's a lot of purple.
Well, Tim, you mentioned Country Banker. Tell us about Country Banker.
Well, Country Banker is a software company that's actually a subsidiary of our bank holding company. So it's a privately owned company. I like to say it's a bootstrap with our own private monies. So we're very different in the software world in that regard. And so it's an analysis, loan analysis for banks to utilize for ag and commercial lending and consumer. We're in 15 states. My oldest son is the chief operating officer of the company. And it's a software application for analysis of balance sheets, income statements, ratios, loan presentations. The list goes on. And so that's what Country Banker is. If I may share, I had a senior lender, it's now one of our client banks in Iowa, asked me, what's my passion? And Chris, my passion is in the mid 80s as I started in banking. I right away was working with loan customers during that. And for those that are listening that don't quite know what mid 80s, what that means in the ag world, that was the greatest downturn in the agriculture industry since the Great Depression. And so I come to realize really fast how good data, or the lack of good data, meaning balance sheets, income statements, how that impacts the decision making with a family, with a loan customer, how that impacts the quality or lack of quality of a bank's portfolio, and how all that impacts the community. And so that's my passion behind Country Banker, and just a brief bit about what we do, Chris.
Well, it's really interesting, Tim, and I am guessing that there are different ways that bankers can go about their world when it comes to ag, but you had to be thinking something. So here's what my question. What was the genesis of you saying, you know what, I got to create this software program and take it out to the industry?
The genesis to it is that in the very early 90s, a group called the Farm Financial Standards Council today took what is generally accepted accounting principles and applied them to agriculture. And that was such a, if I could say, light bulb moment for me. Because after going through the 80s, I realized we just did not have good standardization. We just did not have a good way of approaching analysis of income statements, analysis of ratios. And it just allowed me to just connect the dots that analysis approach is so powerful for lenders to use. And we looked at the nationally at the market and providers that were out there, and felt we could offer a opportunity, a choice for banks to excel in this area to help them with their customers.
Delving deeper into Country Banker, how do your services help the typical banker?
Usually the number one thing that people come to us and say, we ask them, what do you want to achieve? And they say, well, uniformity and consistency of data. That sounds simple, right? But really it's a challenge, and it takes some real focus. And that's where we come into. We provide a very easy, efficient, effective tool. Believe it or not, a lot of people tell us, man, that feels like it's been written by a banker, a vision of a banker. And so we understand the lending process, which is what differentiates us. And we bring a tool that lenders management can use, that's efficient, that's effective to get structured well, good results, yet we allow flexibility. Every bank in their decision-making process, and I understood this from being and understand it being in banking and speaking and working with banks, is that everybody has a route to decision from point A to point B, and everyone may take just a little different route to get there. And we allowed in our software to, as much as possible, to follow a process that the bank may want to take or use, but yet put some very good analytical structure to it. And so it kind of lets them have a bit of their both worlds, the best of it. Because I understand what it means in terms of change with an organization, and there are some things banks are doing that, hey, we want to hang on to this piece of analysis, and what we've done is we've been able to allow those type of things to incorporate, to move through. And we really stress, Chris, and it just comes, I guess, from my educational background, but also something I realized in going through the 80s is that we really stress the reports. We try to make our reports very producer friendly, to where a lender can take, you spend this time doing this analysis, and have a system that you can, for actually less time than banks use now, and get 10 times the output, right? Just much higher level, much better information. But yet take that information and just spend 5 or 10 minutes with your producer or your commercial business person and share that and talk to it and explain it in such a way that they can grasp. And it's amazing how that can be a value build. So those are some of the things that we offer, that we do as a company, and that our clients have experienced.
So, Tim, let me ask you this question. When the banker has a better understanding of those analytics and ratios, does he or she become a better steward for their prospects and customers in being able to transpose that information with a great conversation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I teach and as I tell people, if you will, if I can kind of borrow from another industry, and that is, a doctor can only do as well as the information that the client gives them, or as the information that the doctor takes and has, whether it be a lab or other analysis of the results of being done. Same way with banking. We put folks in a structure to get really good, proper balance sheets, proper information, and it allows that lender to raise that knowledge. And they may have the knowledge, but if they don't have the tool giving them the best output, it doesn't let them be the most effective. And so absolutely, it allows lenders and banks to raise that level of knowledge, raise that level of ability, and then also the power that comes with that, with sharing it with customers, is tremendous. As I tell people, about 5 to 10% of the banks out there really are doing this. And I see this as a great opportunity for those folks that want to challenge themselves, raise the level of knowledge, and differentiate themselves in the marketplace. Because managers of business, managers of ag operations, they like to have a lender who can relate and who can bring that expertise. And it's not, we're not getting into lender liability. We're not telling operations what to do, but it's a way to provide information to share and raise that level with that customer. And so it becomes a very strong value build. It's, as I tell people, don't start talking about interest rate. That's backwards. Talk about the value you bring, and Country Banker helps set that stage for lenders to bring that value, because customers look at banks, they look at lenders as being an expert, if you will, in that area. Because we work with numbers, we work with balance sheets, we work with income statements, we work with ratios, projected cash flows, global analysis. And sharing that information back is a great way to build that relationship. Our customers do not have access to either that type of structured information or that kind of expertise from a lending view. I mean, you may have a tax accountant, which is great, and they're doing a very specific purpose, and that's doing taxes. And you may have a financial consultant, which is great. But what we find in areas that expertise, there can be gaps, or you can work cooperatively together with that tax accountant or with that financial consultant and make just a really good, powerful team for your customer and customers, and bring just a real value. And that differentiation, absolutely. Calling on new customers in terms of business prospects, it's a great way to differentiate from just a price of a credit, and it takes away from being just a commodity.
And Tim, that is such an important point, because unfortunately, too many customers out there, or potential customers, don't understand what a banker can really do for them, because as an industry, we have commoditized our services, and it's unfortunate, because now the bankers are going out there fighting that. So I really do appreciate you talking about the differentiation. Now, what I'd like to do, Tim, I'd like to kind of veer our conversation to some of the things that you talk about when you're talking to, state banking associations and banking schools, if we can.
Certainly. Absolutely.
So here's my first question, and it's about energy, which is becoming a very hot topic, both nationally and globally. But so here's my question. How does a fundamental understanding of energy affect ag lending?
Great question. And you're right. Energy is just, can't pick up an article, can't read anything on your phone or see, something that isn't being talked about out there. In terms of ag lending is an energy intense business. It's estimated that some 70% of whether it's direct or indirect expenses to agriculture production is energy related. So it plays a huge role in our industry on the expense side. On the income side, as I've talked and I've told people and as we've schools and speaking, we are now in the energy business as ethanol has come on the scene as an energy source, which takes about 1/3 of the U.S. corn crop, and has played a very significant role in the beginnings in cleaning up air, in a lot of metropolitan areas, and sometimes we forget that. And as a great energy source, we are now in the energy business, and then when you overlay that with biodiesel, biogas, potential methane production going on, carbon credits, wind and solar, agriculture is very much in the energy business, as well as impacted on the price of energy. So both sides of the ledger, Chris, it impacts expenses, and also it's the income side where it's very impactful. So having just a real fundamental understanding of the energy systems, not only in the United States but worldwide, is important in my opinion, into ag lending as you work with your ag customers.
I'm going to go a little bit granular here, Tim. How does the fallout from the Ukraine situation impact energy and, by default, ag lending?
What an unanticipated event. I've told a number of people the last 2 months, I certainly didn't anticipate a war in 2022. And as we're learning, you have to look at both Ukraine, and you also have to look at Russia combined together. And of course, the history going back to the number of years as being the USSR before that broke up into their individual countries. Russia is a huge supplier of oil and natural gas to Europe and different parts of the world, and to China. And as that war broke out and sanctions on Russia impacting the flow of oil, impacting gas and energy to Europe, impacting, because a lot of gas flows through Ukraine, created a real disruption, as we all saw and are seeing in our energy markets out there, at a time when we're coming off of the pandemic, when the United States and a lot of the world decreased oil production just because of decrease of demand, because the economy shutting down from the pandemic, overlaid with the green movement, and companies looking at that, and actually as they geared back up, not gearing back up as fast, maybe not, as I read, putting as much into capital investment in energy production. And so, a confluence of events as the economies picked up, consumption picked up, at a time when a war hit, changing the flows of energy out there. So that has had a tremendous impact on our energy cost as we see today. And you also have to look at policies, current administration policies, direction of Congress, all of those combined having a tremendous impact. But certainly the Ukraine-Russia war crisis added a huge wrinkle to energy cost, the rerouting of energy flows. It'll remain to be seen if the amount of oil and gas Russia produces finds another way back through the world in the markets. That's going on right now, if you will. And as Europe looks to see how they're going to turn to other partners, if you will, which is happening right now, in terms of energy and energy sources that involve fossil fuels. So it created a significant event worldwide.
And then how does that affect ag lending in this country then?
Sure. Coming back to ag lending in this country, obviously, is our energy prices. Roughly about 40% of the natural gas Russia supplied for fertilizer production. And so at a time last fall, as we saw for various reasons, fertilizer prices increased, we saw further spikes and even shortages in fertilizer, in chemicals, in production. So just having an effect directly at agriculture, both from energy cost, fertilizer cost, as well as chemical cost. Now, Chris, the other side, whenever you have a challenge, there's always opportunity. And one of the opportunities that's created out there is as people were looking for fertilizer sources and replacements for commercial fertilizer, U.S. animal operations, agriculture operations, whether it be dairy, cattle, hogs, whether it be poultry, are finding, if you will, an appreciation or new markets, niches locally for selling manure for fertilizer, because operations are turning to where could they procure sources of fertilizer and looking to natural organic sources and those benefits. So, I described to you the impacts on agriculture. The most immediate that we had, there'll be some potential longer term lasting, but also opportunities being created.
Well, what impact is climate change having on farmers and ranchers? And then by default, how are banks dealing with these customers as a result?
Climate change, as a country and as a world, as we continue to define that, if we will, as we continue to figure out a climate policy, if you will. So we have that still coming together, is my observation with that. In terms of climate change and with impacting agriculture, I think agriculture, a couple things, Chris. Number one, we need to be sure that we really tell our story of what agriculture does in terms of a very positive impact in terms of climate change, in terms of actually very low contribution to the carbon gases, if you will, and that we have really solutions to be able to offer through carbon sequestration, through cropping practices. I mentioned earlier about biogases. There are companies working, especially with dairies, with a combination of manure and feed, to be able to produce biogases, methane, and so there's actually agriculture in terms of the climate change environment. Number one, we need to get our story out and be a part of the policy decision making direction. And number two, we have some real viable, exciting solutions to be able to help to offer in terms of climate change.
Well, Tim, another big topic, maybe the biggest topic in this country, is inflation. And so my question is, how is inflation affecting ag operating expenses and operating capital today?
It's for the reason I laughed just a little bit, Chris, and just I was speaking in Wyoming. I was talking to one of the lenders, a 6-year lender in ag, and just said, "Hey Tim, gosh, it's tough to do any kind of projections this year because tomorrow it's different." and my point with that story is that a lot of lenders today have not gone through an inflationary environment, and it's a different animal. And in my beginning, as I shared, was in the ag crisis, was on the kind of the backside. I was going through college, certainly saw inflation, came into banking just when inflation was hitting its point, and I worked the backside called deflation and saw the ugliness of that, if you will. So in today's inflationary environment, what's happening? I just wrote an article to our clients here just this last month on this very topic, that you can take an operation that has working capital, right? And if it has the same amount of working capital that you start out with in the beginning of $22 amount and the same dollar amount at the end of the year, you're like going, well, my working capital didn't change. It's like, well, no, because we're seeing expense acceleration, right around operations having at least 20%, Chris, higher expenses. Some I've seen them up to 30, some lower. So we read out there an inflation rate of 8%. Agriculture is experiencing much higher in a lot of cases. And if you take, a 20% increase of expenses just by expenses increasing alone, one is having a dilution of working capital. We like to take a look at working capital as a percentage of expense, as of the operator's equity, if you will, a percentage of expense in that operation. And so as I'm telling lenders and putting people on alert, not only this year, Do you have to worry about margins? Do you have to be stress testing, scenario testing? Kind of things are a moving target. Be sure your operators are aware of that. But you need to be allowing profit for just the building of working capital just to maintain a working level of capital and relation of expenses. We've experienced in agriculture what we call the burn rate, a burning of working capital, meaning I had a loss of working capital. Well, in effect, we're having it's not a loss of working capital. It's what I call a dilution that's going on right now. And in the other part, we have a lot of ag businesses out there, maybe custom businesses, if you will, providing services for agriculture. And those businesses need to be sure, just like commercial businesses, just like the grocery store down the street, if you will, that you're constantly monitoring your margins. You're making adjustments in your pricing of your services and or products, because right now, just, with inflation alone is eroding that margin. And man, don't wait till the end of the year. Don't wait till the end of the year to address that, because then that'll be a rude awakening. So in this inflationary environment, one has to be really knowing their cost, where it's heading to, using tools to lock in cost at all possible, using tools to floor in income and protect that margin, but also be penciling in something new this year. And that is, that a remaining margin, excess profit, to build working capital. So we're just not talking about, getting through this year and making all payments and paying all family living. And if I don't have much margin left over, going, I made it through the year. It's like, no, you've got to have a certain margin to build that working capital, Chris, as we move forward. So that's the number one impact going on that I see right now in terms of working capital with operations and margins with businesses and ag-related businesses.
Well, Tim, you mentioned your Wyoming conversations. What concerns do you have in the fact that for many ag lenders, this is the first time they've had to deal with an inflationary environment, which, kind of corresponds to what you mentioned earlier?
My biggest concern is number one, that one doesn't just feel neutralized. That one just feels helpless and says, well, what can I do? Okay. And so that's my number one concern with a lot of lenders and or portfolios and portfolio managers. And as I started writing our clients and talking about, is putting together what I call an inflation toolbox. What are some of the things that you can be doing? And in addition to what I was talking about, projected cash flows, knowing costs, doing that stress testing, scenario testing in this inflationary environment, that is a huge, powerful tool. So lenders have tools. My biggest concern is, knowledge of what those tools can do, the benefit they can bring in an inflationary environment to the producer, to the customer, and obviously to the bank.
All right, Tim, let's look into your crystal ball. What excites you most about the future of ag lending?
What excites me the most, and I see this with new ag lenders coming in, as I work with the next generation of producers, I'm excited about the new people entering agriculture, the men, the women that we've got coming in, both from a production standpoint and a lending standpoint. We've got a lot of energetic, bright people coming into agriculture. And I see that as great opportunity for banks. I love the younger generation in terms of a lot of them will talk about gig income. and that's just another way of saying, well, we'll be diversified, right? With a lot of different sources. And I love that thinking, because we're seeing some real energies going into, we have the big commodity business, but I'm seeing people wanting to pursue, because of the pandemic and because of creative thinking and because of new energies, some real niche markets. In other words, how can I take a small number of acres and specialize in something and make more money? How can I take something in beef production or dairy production hog production and specialize in a market and make more money? How can I be more direct with the consumer or meet consumer demands and needs out there? That excites me. That kind of thinking. So in all sectors and ranges of agriculture and approaches, that's what excites me, Chris. As I see those new people, new operations changing hands, and some really great opportunity out
All right, let me do a 180 on you. What scares you most about the future of ag lending?
Well, as we heard this last week, Fed raising interest rates 0.75%. Near term, a couple things that concern me is the Fed's actions and the impact on our economy and impact on will that impact agriculture values and real estate values? We don't know. We hope not. That was one of the things in the 80s. Of course, interest rates went up to 20%. It popped an agriculture real estate bubble. And I'm not saying that we have a huge real estate bubble, but my observation is we've had quite an acceleration in real estate prices in the last 18 months. And so I've kind of got an eye on that in terms of a concern in how that would impact that. The other side of it is the consolidation of the industry in terms of the animal industry, in terms of the meat packing, in terms of fertilizer, chemical, seed. That is some concern there on into the future because I want agriculture to be able to have choices. I want agriculture to have really good delivery systems that the producer gets the benefit from. And having said that, Chris, I'll dovetail this a little bit. Even though I say that, it is bringing about some opportunities in those very areas, and I hope that opportunity continues.
Well, Tim, you've shared a lot of great ideas, both about Country Banker and about what's going on in the ag world. If somebody has some questions and maybe wants to seek your advice, what's the best way for them to contact you?
I tell you, the best way to contact me, two ways. My email, which would be Timo, Timo, at countrybanker.com. And then you can go to LinkedIn and just search for Tim Ohlde, Ohlde. And you'll find me, and I enjoy when people contact me.
Well, Tim, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you and your wife are celebrating your 35th wedding anniversary. Congratulations. You have a trip planned. So thanks for fitting us into what I know is already a busy schedule.
Absolutely, Chris. Well, appreciate your time, and am excited about being able to teach coming up here in Boulder for the Graduate School of Banking of Colorado.
We'll see you in Boulder.